on perfect wisdom. The LargeSutra on perfect wisdom, with the divisions of the Abhishamaya. Translated by Edward Conze. University of California Press, Berkeley, Los Angeles, London. Translation of the Sutra. Chapter 47. The Disciplining of Greed. Isolated from the defilements. The Lord. They will in their own being be isolated from the need for the disciplining of greed, hate, and delusion. Isolated from the tokens of the defilements. They will in their own being be isolated from the tokens of greed, hate, and delusion. Isolated from the signs of the defilements. They will in their own being be isolated from the signs of greed, hate, and delusion. Isolated from both the points to be shunned and from their antidotes. In their own being be isolated from the attributes of greed, hate, and delusion will be those bodhisattvas, great beings, who resolutely believe in this deep perfection of wisdom. Subhuti. Destined gatika. For what will be those bodhisattvas, great beings, who will understand this deep perfection of wisdom? The Lord. They will be destined for the knowledge of all modes. Subhuti. Will the bodhisattva, the great being, who is destined for the knowledge of all modes, be the resort gati of all beings? The Lord. Yes, Subhuti. It is hard to do. Subhuti. Doers of what is hard are those bodhisattva, great beings who have put on this armor. All beings we will lead to nirvana. And yet therein no being and no concept of a being is apprehended. The Lord. So it is, Subhuti, so it is. Moreover, Subhuti, the armor of that bodhisattva, that great being, is not tied up with form. And why? Because absolutely form does not exist, and also not the bodhisattva's armor. Therefore it is said that not tied up with form surely is this armor. And so with feeling, too, the knowledge of all modes. It is devoted to one aim only. Subhuti. Of that bodhisattva, great beings who has thus put on the great armor, all beings we will lead to nirvana. 2 stations should not be expected, the level of a disciple or the level of a pratyeka Buddha. It is impossible, O Lord, it cannot be that a bodhisattva, a great being who has thus put on the armor, I will lead all beings to nirvana, should fall on the level of a disciple or pratyeka Buddha. That cannot possibly be. And why? Because the bodhisattva, the great being, has not, hemmed in by boundaries, put on the armor for the sake of beings. The Lord. For what reason do you, Subhuti, say that of that bodhisattva, that great being, who thus puts on the armor and courses in this deep perfection of wisdom? Neither of these 2 levels can be expected, the level of a disciple or of a pratyeka Buddha. The program. Subhuti. Because there, O Lord, that bodhisattva, great beings, has not put on the great armor for the sake of a limited number of beings or for the sake of a limited kind of cognition. And why? For the sake of leading all beings to nirvana and for the sake of the cognition of the knowledge of all modes has the bodhisattva, the great being, put on the armor. The Lord. So it is, Subhuti, so it is. It is not for the sake of a limited number of beings that the bodhisattva, the great being, has put on the armor. But on the contrary, for the sake of leading all beings to nirvana and for the cognition of the knowledge of all modes has the bodhisattva, the great being, put on the armor. It offers no basis. Subhuti. Deep, O Lord, is this perfection of wisdom. She is not to be developed by anyone, nor should anything be developed, nor should one develop anywhere. And why? Because in this deep perfection of wisdom one does not get at the full reality of any dharma, which would develop, or which he would develop, or through which he would develop. A development of space, O Lord. This development of the perfection of wisdom. A development of all dharmas, a development of what is not, a development of not taking hold of, a development which is really an undevelopment, that is this development of the perfection of wisdom. The Lord. Of what, Subhuti, is the development of the perfection of wisdom an undevelopment of development? Subhuti. Of form this is an undevelopment of development. Of feeling, too. The knowledge of all modes. The Lord. So it is, subhuti, so it is. This development of perfect wisdom is an undevelopment of the development of form, too. The knowledge of all modes. no settling down. And the Lord further said a mantra 8 to the Ven. Subhuti. The irreversible bodhisattva, great being, should thoroughly ponder on this deep perfection of wisdom, for then he does not settle down in this deep perfection of wisdom as if it were a real thing. And so he should thoroughly ponder on the other 5 perfections too. On the knowledge of all modes, for then he does not settle down in the knowledge of all modes. For then that irreversible bodhisattva, great being, who courses into his deep perfection of wisdom, does not look upon the critical arguments and hints of others as having validity. He does not go by someone else whom he puts his trust in. He does not partake of thoughts connected with greed, hate, and delusion. He is not deprived of the 6 perfections. And when this deep perfection of wisdom is being taught, he will not tremble, be frightened or terrified, nor will his mind turn back. But he delights in hearing this deep perfection of wisdom, and, having heard it, he takes it up, studies it, bears it in mind, teaches it, attends wisely to it, and progresses thusness. One should know, subhuti, that in a former life already that irreversible bodhisattva, great being, has asked questions and counter-question about this deep perfection of wisdom, and has learned it and wisely attended to it. And why? Because the irreversible bodhisattva, when this deep perfection of wisdom is being taught, does not tremble, is not frightened or terrified, is not cowed or despondent, and his mind does not turn back on it. In addition, when he has heard it, he learns and studies it, bears it in mind, and preaches it, and wisely attends to it. Subhuti. How should a bodhisattva who, when this deep perfection of wisdom is being taught, does not tremble, does not allow his mind to turn back on it, apprehend this deep perfection of wisdom? The objective support. The Lord, the bodhisattva, the great being, should apprehend this deep perfection of wisdom through a series of thoughts inclined to the knowledge of all modes. Subhuti. How does the bodhisattva, the great being, through a series of thoughts inclined to the knowledge of all modes, have an apperception of this deep perfection of wisdom? The Lord, the bodhisattva, has an apperception of this deep perfection of wisdom through a series of thoughts inclined to emptiness, the signless, the wishless, to space, to non-production and non-stopping, to non-defilement and non-purification, to suchness, the Dharma element, the reality limit, sameness, the unthinkable element, to the unaffected, to a dream, to a magical creation. Subhuti. When the bodhisattva, the great being, has an apperception of this deep perfection of wisdom through a series of thoughts inclined to emptiness, to a dream and a magical creation, does he then perceive form, or feeling, to the knowledge of all modes? The Lord. When a bodhisattva courses in perfect wisdom, he does not perceive form, to consciousness, to the knowledge of all modes. And why? Because the knowledge of all modes has not been made or unmade. It has not come from anywhere nor gone to anywhere, it does not stand in any spot or place, and its definition cannot be apprehended, nor its coming or going. But that of which no definition and no coming or going can be apprehended, that cannot possibly be fully known by anyone, not through form, or any of the other skandhas. And why? Because form is not the knowledge of all modes, nor is any of the other skandhas. And why? For the suchness of form and the suchness of the knowledge of all modes are just one special suchness. And so for feeling, and everything up to the 18 special Buddha Dharmas. End chapter 47. Note. Followers of the Bodhisattva vehicle may get more benefit from listening to the sutras actively by reading along with a peaceful voice, and walking on a treadmill very slowly to avoid drowsiness. Keep this in mind. Wishing or dreaming to do the goodness is the first steps of doing good. It does not matter one can do it or not. It is the same for wishing to become a Buddha. Bodhisattvas are those people who vow to gain enlightenment in order to bring about unchanging happiness for all living beings. And again, it does not matter they can do it or not. Wishing or dreaming to do the goodness becomes stronger, intense, then serene faith. By repeating the wish, take it up, bear it in mind, recite, study it, discuss and expound, attend to it wisely.